That's all.
Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership, and thank you for your very thoughtful presentation earlier today on Fox News, explaining the issues that we're facing right now. And I appreciate the panel being here today. Mr. Singh, there is bipartisan opposition to the nuclear deal. I was grateful 2 weeks ago at a Foreign Affairs Committee meeting to be present with Senator Joe Lieberman of Connecticut, where he expressed opposition to the deal, and in fact he indicated that there needed to be an override in the event of a veto. I expressed to him my concern, quote, that the Secretary of State designated Iran a state sponsor of terrorism January the 23rd, 1984, over 30 years ago. This was in response to the October 1983 bombing of the U.S. Marine barracks in Beirut, killing hundreds of U.S. Marines, end of quote. Subsequently, I asked Senator Lieberman, has there been any change of course by this regime leading up to the negotiations? Senator Lieberman made a chilling response, I believe, quote, this Iranian government, the Islamic Republic of Iran, has the blood of a lot of Americans on its hands. The Marines at the barracks in Beirut, the soldiers at Khobar Towers. I could go on and on. Incidentally, hundreds of American soldiers were killed in Iraq by Shia militias that were trained in Iran by the IRGC. So your question is a good one. Has the government changed? There is no evidence of it, end of quote. Mr. Singh, do you believe there's been any change prior to the execution of this agreement?
I don't see that change, Congressman. I don't see any evidence to suggest that there has been a kind of strategic shift. We still see Iran actively supporting proxies in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and elsewhere. We still see them funding terrorism. That was clarified by the State Department recently when it released its terrorism report.
And incredibly, yesterday, Congressman Berman indicated that support of terrorism continues with the Houthis, with Hezbollah, with Hamas. And as he correctly stated, that's just terrorist groups that begin with the letter H. And so people should know this. Additionally, Mr. Eisenstadt, what role do you believe the estimated $150 billion infusion to the Iranian economy will play in their well-documented support of terrorist activities in Syria, in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Yemen, and worldwide? And what type of beneficial impact would $150 billion have on the Iranian economy, and what mechanisms are instituted by the U.S. to prevent any use of the funds for destabilization or terrorist activities?
Yeah. Well, again, I think they'll be able to provide money to their allies throughout the region, which they can use in turn to buy arms, for patronage networks, for, in the case of those who have are involved in politics, such as Hezbollah, to provide additional funds for their support base, which ensures their popularity. So I think it'll, and also, we've seen at least reports recently that as a result of sanctions of the last 2 years, they've had to cut back financing or aid to groups such as Hezbollah and Hamas, and that'll be able to reverse that trend of the last few years.
And as we look at Hamas and Hezbollah, could you give an estimate of the number of rockets that have been provided to those terrorists directed at Israel?
Yeah, Hamas, a lot of the rockets are homemade, although they are supplemented by both Syrian and I think Iranian rockets, although I don't have the number of the breakdown between the two. And I think Hamas, at the end of the last war, they started the war with 10,000, and the Israelis believe they destroyed about 2/3 of it. But we know they've been showing videos that they've been rebuilding. Hezbollah, the estimate is about 80 to 100,000. A lot of those are Iranian or Syrian. Again, I don't have really a breakdown of that. But to a large extent, Iran has been providing the wherewithal for the way of war as practiced by these partners.
And Dr. Alterman, according to Human Rights Watch, in 2014, Iran had the second highest number of executions in the world and executed the largest number of juvenile offenders. The country remains one of the biggest jailers in the world of journalists, bloggers, and social media activists, 46 behind bars now. What message does this deal send to human rights violators around the world?
Congressman, I have friends who've been imprisoned in Iran. I take that all very seriously. I take the human rights considerations very seriously. The goal of some people in Iran is if Iran becomes more integrated in the world, then the world standards will get more integrated into Iran. There will be incentives for Iran to behave. There will be incentives for Iran not to be an area of instability because companies won't want to invest in areas of instability.
Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Dr. Alterman, I particularly appreciate